Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And today we're going to finally do our review on Dark Knight Returns Part 1.
Yes.
So, Eric, you and I talked just like the night before you watched this, I think, and I was actually just about to sit down and watch it, and you were like, I'm not even excited about this. I don't think it's going to be good. And you were singing a very different tune after you watched it.
Well, going into it, I was really worried that it was going to be really censored and watered down. And to some extent it was, but in other places it wasn't, which is really going to be my review for the entire thing. But coming out of it, I was surprised by how much they did leave in, and how much just bits of political, subtext and criticisms that were left in the film. I'm going to say straight up, this film will kind of maybe go up or down in my eyes based on how political the next one is. Because if they really pull punch to the next one, I'm going to be really disappointed.
It is a bit of an odd thing because it feels like we're reviewing half a movie, because we basically are reviewing half a movie.
And it feels like that.
Yeah, and... Oh, no, that's okay. What I was going to say is, even though it's half a movie, and you knew it was going to be that walking in, when you watch two movies like this that you know we're going to have a big cliffhanger at the end of the first one, it's very, very important where they decide to cut. And I was really impressed where this left off at the end. I think they put it exactly in the right place.
What I thought was interesting in watching it was that the first two issues of Dark Knight Returns can actually work on their own. Like literally, you can tell the stories they told in the first issue. He comes back being Batman, he stops Two-Face, and he decides to be Batman again. Like that can be the whole thing. And then when it keeps going, you're like, okay, well, in the first one, they kept talking about mutants. It can stop there as well. The only reason this really feels like it's got a cliffhanger is the Joker thing. Because it can kind of end on a kind of like the Dark Knight note, where you don't have to have a sequel. You can kind of figure out what's going to happen beyond it. Because he has been a police commissioner who's kind of, anti-Batman. Well, it can stop there. It does kind of work on its own.
That's a good point. I mean, in a way, it kind of tells a full story because he does, take care of the mutant gang, and then at the end, it's kind of, okay, Batman's back, and he's got a new Robin, and, we know where she came from and why she's there. So, yeah, you're right. You could kind of leave it right there.
And really, you could probably even leave it with the Joker and just be like, okay, well, Batman's going to go back to being Batman, the Joker's going to come back.
Yeah, do you think that people that had never read Dark Knight Returns would maybe accept that if it didn't have the word Part 1 in it, if they didn't know they were watching half a movie? Like, do you think those people would watch that and just be like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's a cool way to bring Batman back after several years?
I don't know, because I hadn't really talked to anyone that didn't know it was Part 1.
Yeah, sure.
I've watched it. I've actually watched it 3 times now.
Oh, wow.
I watched it once by myself.
You're two up on me.
Once with my mom and once with my girlfriend. So I got some different perspectives all around on it.
Did it hold up each time? I mean, do you still like it as much as you did the first time?
Except for the Harvey Dent scene, which I didn't like to begin with, and every time I watch it, I'm just like, oh, he delivers those lines so well.
Okay, go ahead and start there. What's the problem with that scene?
There's definitely a part of it is, well, that's not how I read it. Because I know this book very well. And so the scene doesn't play at all how I had it in my head for so long. But I don't think it plays on its own either. I feel, and I know you don't agree with me, but I feel like the way that he delivers his lines are really, really wooden and hollow. Like, it's just like, you all had your joke. You were able to look at me with keeping everything down, or at least now both sides match. Like, I don't know. I've always thought that he was having like a mental breakdown at that point. Like this was him just at the end, and it didn't feel like that.
Maybe what
That, and I hate what they did with the Two-Face thing in the comics. And maybe it would be difficult to do in animation, but in the comics, the whole thing is he tells Batman, close your eyes and listen. And Batman hears that it's the dark side of Two-Face, and kind of in his mind, he's realizing he sees Two-Face as a whole, but the dark side. And he's like, it's not Harvey talking, it's, the dark side. With this, it just kind of shows up as an effect. Where my girlfriend was confused. She was like, so does he think his face is burned? Like what? I'm like, no, it's supposed to be that's supposed to be what he really is. It's just the outside doesn't match the inside, that kind of thing. I thought that whole scene didn't work great. I actually think the first half is weaker than the second half. Because the first half, I feel like the first half of the first quarter goes way too fast. Him becoming Batman again goes way, way too fast. And then there's a lot of just weird changes with the Two-Face thing. When Batman comes to Gordon in the animated film, he just says, it's dead, and there's like a question of like whether he's gone back to being Two-Face or he's just dead now. In the comic, they're not sure if it is dead or if it's just someone like cashing in on the name and doing characters because Dent's out. That's all cut. It felt like the first half of the movie was just more cut down than the second half.
I agree with you. I had the same thing with it, and I don't know the book quite as well as you do, but just from, and of course, I've read it a couple times, but I think that I had an easier time kind of just looking at it as a viewer and trying to get a sense of what people that hadn't read the book might experience. And I really think that the same, I think that people would be likely to have some of the same problems just watching it as a film, even if they hadn't read the thing, because it, like you said, it really picks up in the second half, which is, again, kind of funny because I feel like it's half a movie. It's like the second half of the first part of half a movie. But when like all the energy of that movie comes when he starts fighting the mutants. I want to talk about the mutant gang, because one of the things that I thought was a bit weird, and something I thought that didn't translate as well at the beginning, was the way the mutants were talking, and I felt like it. Almost like as it went along, the mutants started sounding more like they did in the book, and it was a little bit jarring to me, because the mutants, of course, as far as I know, aren't really mutants. They're just a gang called that. But
that was actually confusing for my mom. She's like, so what's mutated about them? I'm like, they're not. They're just kind of teenagers.
Right, but they like try to act like they're a completely different subculture, and they have their own way of speaking and stuff. And of course, the mutant leader looks like a mutant. I mean, he's this big, kind of half deformed looking sort of guy. But when in the book, I always felt like I had to kind of guess if they were really mutants or not as I first started reading them, because they really did feel like a totally different species. And I think Miller makes it very clear that they're human beings, but I think that he wants you to guess for a minute because they kind of become their own thing. In the movie, they really do at first feel like they're just kind of dressed this way, and they sort of talk normal, like they're using the words a little bit, but they're delivering them straighter than I pictured it in the novel. And then as it went along, they started acting a little bit more out of sorts, like they were in the novel, like they don't fit in with the rest of society. And you started hearing more of that dialogue, and then shivs started popping up and stuff like that. And I wondered about that because I thought it was a little bit incongruous.
Well, I think maybe that might just be the voice actors getting more comfortable as it goes along,
or maybe even different voice actors. Maybe they weren't all the same people at the beginning as they were in the middle, because I mean they're different characters.
Right. Well, because ahead of time, I was like, I don't care how perfect they make this, that dialogue cannot be spoken. And I thought for what it was, it sounded pretty good.
I was impressed with it too.
I think I said to one of my friends, I'm like, there's no way you can make Slice and Dice sound good the way that they say in that book, and it totally worked.
Let's talk about
Slice and Dice, man, Slice and Dice.
Let's talk about the animation for a minute, because that was one of the things that I was really worried about. And I've heard people complain even after seeing the whole movie that they don't like the animation, that it's not faithful enough to the graphic novel. I know you've said before that you don't think that style is fully animatable, if that's a word, and I would kind of agree. When I saw previews for this, I was like, oh, it looks too clean, it's too bright. For whatever reason, in the context of the movie, it not only worked, I thought it was fantastic.
I think it is the best looking of all of the direct-to-DVD videos. Like, it felt like they cared about this film when they went to animate it. It's the closest to what I've been asking for these films to look like. And I feel like the designs kind of played down the middle. Like Batman doesn't really look like no one's Batman. He's just a big Batman. But like Gordon looks spot on. Gordon is exactly the Gordon from the book. I think most of their characters were on model for the most part.
I thought Robin was.
Yeah, Robin looks great, and I thought she did a good job.
I did too. I liked her. Now, again, it's been a while since I've read the novel. Let me ask you this: did they cut a lot of her scenes out, or is she really in that little of it at the beginning?
I haven't. I usually end up reading it like once a year. I hadn't read it yet. And actually, when this came out, I lent it out, so I couldn't even go back and reread it.
And I didn't reread it for this.
I feel like she's in it that little.
Okay.
In the beginning, the thing I have with this is I don't know the book well enough to know when it cuts, where I'm like, oh, there's a scene missing. But I knew it well enough that when we got to a certain point, I'm like, oh, we never got to that scene. We never got the scene where Two-Face goes back to his goons, which is fine because that's not a necessary scene. We don't get the scene where the Joker talks to that big fat guy that works for him that makes Two-Face's bombs.
But I thought in the context, just talking about Joker for a second, I thought in the context of this movie and the way that they're splitting it up into two, it was really great that we didn't get any Joker until the end. I mean, we do see him before that, but I mean, where he's actually talking.
Yeah, the way that they kind of re-edited those scenes and moved them around, I think works really, really well.
And I gotta say, I like Michael Emerson a lot as an actor. I'm a big Lost fan, as some people know, and Ben was one of the coolest and creepiest things about that show. And he's such a good pick for Joker. He's got a single line of dialogue in this, and so I can't really talk about him yet. But I'm very excited that that's who they got for that character, and I can't wait to see what he does with it.
I have no idea who he is, and he totally sold me in that one line of dialogue. And then I went and I watched the special features on the DVD, and just physically, I'm like, well, if they wanted to make this movie tomorrow, he's perfect for the Joker.
Yeah, he physically could do it.
Which they did earlier this year with Year One. Bryan Cranston is perfect for Gordon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The guy that cast for Gordon in Year One can totally play Gordon in a movie. Tomorrow. But I think it's interesting to do it. Of course, I wouldn't be completely opposed to Peter Weller being Batman in Dark Knight's film.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only version he could play, because it's kind of neat that Peter Weller is kind of that age. So I kind of like that they got a guy that's that age to play that part. Now that I'm thinking about it, can I mention the weird thing that I've got that nobody else probably would ever think of that I told you about? I think I liked Peter Weller in this role, but he kept doing something that in his vocal inflections that reminded me of another actor and almost made me wish that he had been in this instead.
Oh, yeah.
I think Adam West could have played this role. And I know a lot of people are probably like, what? Really? Adam West? Here's the thing. When I talked to Wally Wingert, and he's a big he's not only a big fan of Adam West, but he's actually good friends with Adam West. And he said back in the late '80s when they were talking about how the '89 film was that they had looked to Dark Knight Returns some making that movie, and a lot of people were speculating that they were actually going to make Dark Knight Returns the movie. Some people actually wanted Adam West because at the time he would have been the right age to play that role, and it would have been cool to see him come back, reprise the role, but do a serious dark version. And I kind of wish they'd given him the chance to do that here, because Peter Weller, in a lot of places, kind of sounds like a serious Adam West. And I've heard Adam West voice serious before. So I'm sorry, say that again.
I said, in a similar way, I really wish Two-Face was Billy D. Williams.
That could have worked too, although I don't know if they wouldn't have had to change his skin color from the comic, which I guess could have been okay, but I'm just saying. But I'm with you. I think it would be cool to see Billy D. Williams come back and reprise that role somehow.
Now, you know Adam West better than I do.
Yeah.
I know him as the 60s Batman, and then the kind of caricature of Adam West that he plays, kind of like how Shatner plays Shatner now. So I don't really know Adam West as a serious actor. I know he was. I know he was almost James Bond after Connery left.
And he was offered the role.
He's not completely silly, but I've never seen him do serious stuff.
Not only was he almost James Bond, but he was offered the role and declined it because he thought James Bond has to be British.
Right.
Adam West has definitely voiced some serious characters, and of course he was in the Grey Ghost episode in the animated show, and he actually did the mayor in the Batman, which of course isn't my favorite show, but I watched an episode of that the other day that somebody asked me to watch because they wanted to know what I thought of it, and he actually had some really serious dialogue in that and sounded great. I don't know. I think even at his age, he could have done this. He's still doing voiceover work and stuff.
Just the one big deterrent to that is that they don't want that kind of like association. Not like anything against them, but I think maybe they wanted someone that like people would hear and go, okay, I know who that is and I like him and things, but there's no immediate expectations.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and I didn't mean to belabor this point, because I'm not saying that they made a snafu by not casting Adam West or someone else. Peter Weller did fine, and I think that, again, it's cool that they got an actor who is that age. And, of course, Adam West is now 20 years older than that.
I really like Peter Weller in this, and it's a really weird thing, because the first time I watched this, every single time he'd say a line, my first thought would be, well, that's not how I pictured it in my head. That's how I've heard it all these years. And then my immediate next thought would be, but I like what he did with it. It's totally, he's not as gravelly as I think you would assume he'd be. If there's any real knock, I think he didn't differentiate between Bruce and Batman enough.
Which is kind of okay to me.
Earlier in the film, it kind of plays with the idea that Batman may be a slightly separate personality.
Yeah, there's that.
There kind of needs to be a little bit more differentiation.
Okay, that's fair. You know, I hadn't thought of that point. What I almost said was I could kind of see it just because he's not dealing with Gordon as two people anymore, because Gordon knows who he is and stuff like that. So in his mind, he doesn't have as much of a reason to differentiate between the two. But you're right, that is thematically in there, that he and Two-Face have something in common, that they kind of both have split personalities. I want to make a statement that I kind of want to branch more of my comments off of, and that is, I think this film, having not seen the rest of it, of course, just based on this first one, I think this movie is better than what they did with Year One.
Absolutely.
In both visually with the action scenes, which I think are dynamic and spectacular, and I love the Batman fight against the mutant leader. I think it's fantastic. But also because one of the big problems that you and I had, or really the big problem you and I had with Year One, was that they lifted it actually too much just straight from the comic, and we didn't understand really the point of it, because it really felt like, okay, I'm just reading the comic book. Here, it's really an adaptation, and you can kind of see the point of having it in both mediums.
Right. Well, okay, can I get to two big problems with the film.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That I wanted to make sure that I got that in because that's my biggest that's my biggest recommendation for the film. Go ahead.
My biggest problem with the film, um, and coming out of year one is really what scared me, is that they muted so much stuff in year one politically, or even not just politically, like they just like the scene between Selena Kyle and the guy that she's servicing, I guess, that dialogue is incredibly toned down. And there's scenes throughout where they do that. And I was really worried this is going to happen in this one. And what's weird is it like half did. There were certain bits where I thought they were really, really toned down. There were other bits where I wasn't sure if they were toning down or if they were cutting for time. Like the mayor, we cut the mayor twice. And he's just like, still polling. And one of the big things is because my mom laughed at some of the genuinely funny bits in the film. Like a lot of like psychobabble and stuff that they say about Batman. Like my mom actually laughed at it. But what I think is one of the better punchlines totally fell flat for her because she didn't get it. With the mayor when he picks Commissioner Yindel, the joke is that he doesn't have an opinion on Batman. It didn't matter whether Yindel was pro or anti-Batman. He just wanted someone that could make that decision for him. He just wanted someone that was had a strong opinion of Batman one way or the other. And then when it cuts back to the news people, they go, well, this with the mayor's strong stance on Batman, that's a gag. But you don't get it in the movie because you see the mayor like twice, and you don't really get the implication that he's that spineless. And there were just bits where I just felt they censored things that shouldn't have been censored. There's a big one when they're talking to people about Batman, and they say, and there's this one guy who's going on and on about, Batman's great, he's kicking all the right butts, he's kicking butts that, the cops ain't kicking. And in the comic, he goes, I hope he goes after the homos next. And in the movie, he says, I hope he goes after my landlord next. That completely alters that scene.
You might as well take it out at that point.
Exactly. Because by saying, I hope he goes after the homos next, it's making a very strong, this guy is incredibly conservative thing. Which is something that's done very well in the book, is that it's very clear conservative people are more for Batman than the liberal people in this book. But that doesn't mean that it makes sure not to say that the conservative people are right and they're the ones holding up Batman. Miller goes out of his way to show extremist conservative people supporting Batman. And by doing it this way, he just comes off like a stupid guy. He doesn't come off like an extremist like he is in the book. And there's a lot of that where it's changed and it's muted, and then... Well,
that's not a political statement of any kind. That just feels like just a bad joke. Like a bad joke.
Yeah. And then Terry Kelly's parents, I couldn't believe... Like, literally, I was like, I cannot believe I'm watching an animated Batman film where that just happened. It was just bizarre, because it felt like... Whereas year one, it was across the board. I felt like everything was kind of censored. In this, it seemed like sometimes it was censored and sometimes it wasn't. And sometimes it felt like maybe it was just for time. But then, because they split in half, it seems like they felt like they had more time to... They could play it more like a movie. Except that all of those scenes where they just kind of left the camera there for a couple extra seconds bothered me. Because I was like, you could have taken those couple extra seconds and they could have been a line that you cut. And because they're animated, I'm not getting anything off of them. There's a scene with Robin and Alfred, where Alfred says, hands to yourself. She looks at him, and then he looks at her, and then she looks at him, and he looks at her.
Yeah.
You just want Weird Al for a second, didn't you?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I did think of that. And shuddered a little bit. I don't think that I'm entirely 100% sure that very much of that was cut for time. As far as definitely there were things that were cut for time, but as far as the things where they were like where they were censoring themselves, because it seems really haphazard. A lot of the things that they censored wouldn't have taken any longer to say. Uh, so I'm just not sure about that. I mean, the landlord thing being a perfect example, but there are others where it's just like, well, it's not almost the same syllable count. It's really just we changed a line because we didn't want to go there. But then, like you
There's
said,
a
there are
weird
other
one.
places where you're like, man, they sure went pretty far there. It's hard to decide what their it's hard to decide why they made those choices and what their check was. It's like, so we don't want to have, maybe they were just, with say that line, they were afraid of offending people on a hot button topic. But then other things, I don't know, man.
Yeah, that hippie thing, I'm really surprised that got left in, but the homo line got cut out. Um, but another line that was changed that I thought was kind of weird was when Two-Face goes on television in the book, he says, I want $5 million. I would have made it two, but I got bills to pay. In this, he just says $20 million or $22 million. I'm like, why couldn't it have been $50 million and I would have made $20 million, but I got bills to pay? Like I didn't.
And that's
Like,
not, I'm
like
telling
it
you, that's not for time. There's
would
no
have taken
way.
like 3 seconds longer.
Because if you're going to cut for time in an action movie, you cut little pieces of the action. And Bruce Timm
Right.
talks about that kind of thing all the time in some of his commentaries on some of his cartoon shows or his animated shows rather, about how there are definitely places where they need to cut for time, and they usually take it out of those scenes because the exposition stuff is important. You need those lines of dialogue, especially in something kind of short. Well, this obviously it's longer, but they still have to really think about time because they wouldn't have split it up like they did into two parts if they thought the story could be told in a short amount of time. So I think that they still have to look at it kind of like it's short and not as much time as they'd like to deal with it. But still, they've got those places that linger a little bit. I think that usually it works okay because it's paced better than a lot of their other animated films have been.
Yeah. Well, and there was like when I rewatched it, there was a bit I caught because I can't tell you what new scenes are and aren't in the first two issues. Like I know what the new scenes are, but I couldn't tell you where they fall in the story. So, like for all I know, they could have covered every single new scene. But one that I caught they cut, and I'm assuming that this one is for time. Although maybe I would have cut one of Dr. Walper's lines because it's really, I feel like they cut it because it's redundant. But I felt like, I don't know, like it felt like maybe they cut it because it's a little bit controversial. Was when Lana Lang is talking to somebody else, she says something about Batman. And when it cuts back to him, he just says, of course he knows what he's doing. His kind of fascist always does. Well, that's a longer line. In the book, he goes into how the villains aren't accountable for themselves. And then she says, what do you think Batman is? He goes, of course he is. He's kind of fascist always is. And it felt weird they just kept that end bit. And it was almost like an non sequitur. Like it didn't have anything with what she just said.
Now, you might disagree with this.
Stuff like that probably bother me if I didn't know the book so well.
Yeah, sure. Now, you might disagree with this.
You're taking the hell out of it.
But I don't think... I honestly am not sure that it needed all the new stuff that it actually put in. Or that it couldn't have...
I felt like it needed more or less.
What's that?
I felt like it needed more or less.
Yeah, because...
Like they ended up in this weird middle area where it wasn't enough or it was too much, depending on what they were going for.
In the comic book, and Miller does this, I think, in other places too, he likes to use those news things as both a way to give exposition, but more often as a way to kind of give the social point of view of different sorts of people, and to see what different different groups of people at large seem to think about things and kind of, play different, conservative and liberal dynamics against each other, and then use the actual story to then play those out. And here, I just don't know if that works as well on screen. Because it kind of, again, I said that the movie is paced really well, and it is, and those scenes don't take up a lot of time, but especially when you get toward the end, there are these places where, like, the narrative keeps getting interrupted with them, like over and over again. And again, it works in a comic book in a way that I'm not real sure it works in a movie. And I kind of would have liked to have seen some creative way for some of that information to have been given outside of those news stories. I think it was a lot better with, like, the interview with Lana Lang and those things, as opposed to just a reporter reporting. But again, it wasn't as jarring to me as I think it might be for other people, just because I've read the book, so I was expecting that. But I was trying to look at it from the perspective of somebody that hadn't read the book, and I don't think people are really accustomed to seeing constant news stories like that.
You know what's great about the Lana Lang thing, by the way?
What's that?
That Lana Lang is so well known now because of Smallville.
It's kind of fun to see her.
Wow, Lana really let herself go.
I know, that's kind of fun. Well, hey, do you have any final thoughts? We are into half an hour.
I actually have two quick more criticisms.
Oh, okay.
The first one is they cut all the narration. I felt like that was a mistake. You don't have to keep all of it, but they cut all the narration, and actually, I watched it with my mom. She was talking about, she was like, well, it doesn't feel like he's old. It just feels like he just gets back into it. And there's a couple of shots here and there where, like, you see him, like, grunting or struggling a little bit, but that's really sold by the narration. And because it's not there, it does just kind of feel like he just goes back to being Batman. Without all of those lines of, like, my chest is on fire, or, I feel like a young man again, I know it's going to hurt in the morning, right now I don't care. All of that's gone. There's no narration at all.
I think there are ways that they could have done some of that visually. I think they could have played, like I said with some of the news things, I think they could have found creative ways to put some of that in there without doing narration. On the other hand, knowing this is a Frank Miller work, just on the principle of the thing, it's weird to have something written by Frank Miller in any form at all without narration, because that's what he does, and like it or hate it, he's always got that. And I'm pretty sure Year One used it all over the place.
Yeah, well, and what's kind of weird is there's places that are silent that I know are not supposed to be silent. Like, it's just like Bruce running, and, like, I'm feeling a narration in my head.
Yeah, see, that's kind of weird. Because you're like, this isn't giving us any information or about the character or anything. He's just doing things.
Well, and I think it really hurts at the beginning of the film where he's becoming Batman. Like, all of that's kind of. The one that I miss the most is when he turns on Mark of Zorro. In the book, he has this bit where he's like, no, it's okay, I can watch this. It's just a movie. And then he starts kind of flipping out. In the movie, he just kind of puts it on. And I don't know, it's not the same. My other one, which is probably the most minor gripe I have with the film, is that Dark Knight Returns has these amazing splash pages. Every single splash page in that book is burned into my subconscious. And more than that, they're used in pretty much any documentary about Batman or about superheroes in general when they get to that point where they talk about Dark Knight Returns. Almost all of them are cut here, and I think it's weird. There's the big one where he's falling and he shoots his gun, the hook line into Two-Face's helicopter. There's a big double page spread of him, like, falling and shooting. That shot's in the movie, but it's like 2 seconds. Like, it's a blink and you miss a shot. And I think it's weird they didn't, like, linger on it more, especially since they lingered on him jumping in front of the lightning, which isn't even in the book. It's a cover. But then he goes and he sees that army general, and in the book there's this really famous scene of him holding that guy's body wrapped in the American flag.
Yeah.
That's not in the movie. He leaves the room and you hear a gunshot.
Yeah, I wondered about that one myself.
And then the one that I can understand the best cutting, but it's weird because it looks like they animated it and then cut it, is the one where Bruce is naked and Carrie Kelly hugs him. In that scene, in the movie, he puts his hand on her and she turns back, and it looks like that scene's about to happen, and then it just cuts. I thought it was a weird choice to remove all of the famous splash pages from the film. It didn't ruin the film, but I thought it was a weird choice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it kind of makes up for it in just that the action is so well done, and
absolutely. Both mutant fights are phenomenal.
But I do agree with you, and I kind of think that you mentioned him jumping in front of the lightning bolt. I really expected that they would put that in there, even though it was a cover, just because it's been parodied and homaged so many times in so many things. I think they probably felt like they had to. But at the same
the cover of the DVD, because the cover of the DVD.
But at the same time, that's what I was going to say. What is with that cover? It doesn't even look like Dark Knight Returns. It needed to look Miller.
Like that cover would not make me want to pick it up.
What I don't understand, have you seen? Because I know you've been reading a trade lately. But there are these ads for that movie that have been in a lot of single issues lately in DC books, and the ads that they're showing will have these full page ads will have the picture of the DVD, and then around it, like right next to it, in the background is Carrie Kelly and Batman. Like running, and it's like or jumping, and it's like a side view, and it looks like almost a panel straight out of the comic. I'm like, why wasn't?
What you're talking about, but that image doesn't actually show up till I think issue 3. But I know exactly. That's another famous splash page.
But
it's them like jumping from like rooftop to rooftop.
But why wasn't that the cover?
I have no idea.
Maybe that'll be the cover for the second one. I don't.
Why wasn't that cover?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many images that I think I'm interested to know what the next cover is. If it's just another generic cover.
I would bet money it'll have Joker on it.
I was thinking the same thing, but I'm not. I'm like, well, what do you do with it? I don't know.
But that'd be the way to sell it, because I mean, like, when they got Joker in something, they usually like to try to use him to sell things. Although they didn't do it with Red Hood. So. No, you're right. They didn't do it with Red Hood, so maybe not.
There's another big famous splash page that's kind of actually in the film, where it's Bruce getting out of the tank to fight the mutant leader, and his fists are up. In this, he like jumps them, and then like he puts his fists up. I know it's there, but it's weird. It's not necessary they did anything wrong with this film. It's they made weird choices that I wouldn't have made.
Yeah,
that's really all it is. And being such a fan of it, it's not perfect. I'm nitpicking it. There's minor noises. If you gave me time, I would complain that the scene where he's got his hands over the guy's eyes, that wasn't long enough. Like, I have minor gripes. Like, literally, like, seconds not long enough. Like, it should have been, like, 4 seconds longer.
But wasn't it 3 times more watchable than you thought it was going to be?
It is absolutely more watchable than I thought it was going to be. And I think, honestly, the animation being so good, and the performances, for the most part, being so good, is really what makes it watchable.
I think that your average Batman fan, or just people that are kind of they watch Batman things but they're not big fans, that haven't read Dark Knight Returns before, they may have a few places where they question some stuff, but for the most part I think they'll enjoy this, and I think they'll be able to follow it.
Yeah, I think pretty much anyone who likes Batman, especially the Nolan films, can enjoy this if they can get past the fact that it's a cartoon. I think it's so kind of visceral and brutal with the action scenes. I think you can really show this to someone who wouldn't usually watch a cartoon.
I think so too. Yeah. So I'm definitely recommending the film.
I'm also recommending it. And I would also say a substitute for the book. If you have read the book, do go with the book. This is not like tell what it's with the movie. But it's really good. I really enjoyed it much more than I thought I would.
You were cutting out there a little bit. Eric was just saying that if you haven't read the book, you should definitely still read the book and not just watch the film.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
You were a little
Thank
bit
you for
garbled.
translating my gargle.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
That's just my natural dialect. And
No,
sometimes
no
I
problem.
just slip into that.
Eric, my big fear, and I really don't think this will happen, but the thing I would be a little bit afraid of is just that the second part won't quite live up to the first part, and then it will be as hard to enjoy the first part and to recommend it.
I think even if the Superman bit falls apart and they don't use Reagan, which will break my heart if they don't use Reagan, based just on that last scene, at least the Joker half of the next one is going to be great.
Well, that's a point we didn't make that I should probably throw out really quick. That you always say when you and I talk about this is that the Reagan part really kind of should be there, not just because it was in the book, but because this isn't Batman in the future. This is a period piece where Batman is just aged.
Yeah, well, it's Batman 1986. It's Batman in the year it came out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I called it a period piece. That's not quite right because it was modern. I mean, because it was present day when it was put out. But I just mean that it's a book set in the mid '80s where Batman has gotten old.
Yeah,
I think that's an.
It almost lines up that this is the '60s TV show Batman.
Yes. That's why I wanted it to be Adam West.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's but I think that's an important distinction to make in case people don't know this book and haven't thought of it. Because
everyone called it, said it was Batman in the future for years. When Frank Miller got around doing the sequel, it's just the future.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good point.
But regardless, this is much better than I thought it was going to be. It's much more respectful than I thought it was going to be. It's got that weird bit where sometimes it's pulling its punches and sometimes it's not. I don't think we mentioned it's not gory, but it's violent. There's a lot of blood in it.
It's definitely violent, and I think
is not for the kids.
Maybe that's where they were trying to. That was a place where they were trying to make up for the fact that they wanted to censor themselves a little bit in some other places. We'll make it violent.
PG-13.
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
And I would say any kid, maybe 9 to 13, watch it before you show it to them.
Yeah,
and really decide if you want your kid to see this. But like I said, I liked it. I thought it was good.
I think it's even quite a bit more brutal than Red Hood was.
Absolutely. That fight with the mutant, when the mutant eats the mayor. There's nothing Red Hood like that.
No. Well, anyway, everybody, thanks a lot for listening to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. Eric, thanks a lot for joining me again to do none of these movies. I know this is kind of our big ritual. Yeah. So hopefully they keep making these and we get to keep doing this. I know they're apparently.
Except for the times when it's not tradition, because one of us didn't see it.
What's that?
I said except for those times when it's not tradition, because one of us didn't see it.
I guess there's been a couple of those.
All-Star Superman.
Oh, we didn't do All-Star Superman, did we? Okay.
I didn't see All-Star Superman until like a month ago.
And we haven't done either of the Green Lantern films. I think those.
I'm not going to watch them.
I think those both came out since we started doing this, but I don't remember. Maybe not.
I just have no interest.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Green Lantern fans. I have them. I haven't watched them, but I do have them. So I will.
I heard Emerald Knights is good.
Yeah, I heard that's great. But anyway, everybody, thanks a lot for listening. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Eric.
And we'll see you just after part 2 comes out.